The making of Post Malone, From Dreams to Destiny. In the dusty heat of Grapevine, Texas, a teenage boy sat in his room surrounded by empty soda cans, old guitars, and posters of rock legends. His name was Austin Richard Post, but soon the world would know him as Post Malone. He wasn't born with fame in his hands. His father worked for the Dallas Cowboys as a concessions manager, and his mother was the heart of the home, warm, funny, and fiercely supportive. Music ran through the house like air. His dad used to play everything from classic rock to hip-hop. Prince, AC/DC, Kanye, Metallic, and that strange mix shaped young Austin's soul. By the time he was 9, he was already strumming a guitar and dreaming of rock stardom. But when he discovered hip-hop, something clicked. He realized he didn't have to fit inside one box. He could be everything: rapper, singer, rocker, dreamer, all at once. At 16, he recorded his first mixtape. He called it Young and After Them Riches. Funny thing is, he made it using Audacity, the free recording software most people used for fun. But Austin wasn't playing. He gave copies to his classmates, and soon the whole school knew his name. Still, fame felt miles away. After high school, he packed his bags and moved to Los Angeles with his friend Jason Probst, a gamer known online as JGRX. They didn't have money, but they had passion, and that was enough. They lived in a small house filled with other dreamers, musicians, streamers, and wild souls chasing the same impossible dream. And in that tiny house of chaos, something magical happened. One night, while fooling around with some chords and beats, Post recorded a song that would change everything. He uploaded it to SoundCloud without expecting much. The song was called White Iverson. Within days, it exploded. Millions of plays. Everyone wanted to know, who was this tattooed kid with the sleepy voice and sad eyes, blending rap, rock, and R&B like it was nothing? In one song, he became a mystery the world couldn't ignore. Labels started calling. The name Post Malone, a mix of his last name and a rap name generator, was suddenly everywhere. The boy from Texas had arrived, but he had no idea how heavy fame could be and how much it would cost him. White Iverson, the song that built a legend. The night White Iverson dropped on SoundCloud, Post Malone didn't expect anything to happen. He had uploaded it half asleep, wearing the same ripped jeans he'd been living in for days. But by morning, his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications, mentions, reposts. It was like the internet had discovered something raw, something real. The song wasn't just catchy. It was emotional, hypnotic, and different. It didn't sound like typical rap or pop. It sounded like a confession wrapped in melody. When I started ballin', I was young. That line hit people right in the heart. It wasn't just about basketball or fame. It was about dreams, struggle, and wanting more when you've got nothing. Within a week, White Iverson had over 1 million plays. Within a month, the whole industry was calling. Wiz Khalifa's manager reached out. Republic Records wanted a meeting. Everyone wanted to know who this sleepy-sounding white kid was, and how he'd managed to make something that felt so fresh, so painfully honest. When Post walked into record label offices, he wasn't polished or rehearsed. He didn't have a stylist or fancy chains, just braids, a shy smile, and that golden energy that made people stop and listen. They didn't just see potential. They saw something authentic, something rare. He signed with Republic Records in 2015, the same label that had The Weeknd, Drake, and Ariana Grande. It was surreal. Just a year earlier, he was broke in a shared LA house, wondering if music would ever pay off. Now he was in high-rise meetings, hearing his name next to legends. But even in that moment of glory, Post stayed calm. He didn't brag. He didn't fake anything. He knew his sound wasn't perfect, and he didn't want it to be. That imperfection, the cracks in his voice, the sadness behind his smile, was exactly what made him real. White Iverson wasn't just a song. It was his story, a song that opened the world's doors and also the floodgates of expectation. Because once the world loves you, it starts to watch you. Every move, every word, every tattoo becomes a headline. And Post Malone was about to learn what it really means to live under the spotlight, the rockstar dream, and the lonely road ahead. Fame came faster than Post Malone ever imagined. One moment he was a kid uploading songs in a cluttered LA house. The next, he was flying across the country, performing White Iverson in front of thousands. Cameras flashed, fans screamed, and suddenly, the world expected him to be a superstar. But behind that fame was a young man still figuring himself out. Post wasn't trying to be a rapper or a pop icon. He just wanted to make music that felt real. Yet now, he was labeled everything. The next big thing, the future of hip-hop. A culture vulture. Everyone had an opinion, and not all of them were kind. Still, Post kept smiling. His charm wasn't loud or fake. It was disarmingly genuine. He'd show up at interviews with a beer in hand, cracking jokes, calling everyone buddy. He wasn't trying to play a role. He was just being himself. That honesty made people love him even more. Then came Congratulations, the anthem that would make him a household name. The song captured his entire journey, the disbelief, the grind, the gratitude. Worked so hard, forgot how to vacation. Wasn't just a lyric. It was the truth. Post had poured everything into his dream, and it was finally paying off. But the higher he climbed, the lonelier it became. Nights on the tour bus felt endless. City lights blurred together. The cheers faded when the music stopped. He'd scroll through his phone, seeing millions of followers, yet feel completely alone. Fame, he realized, didn't fix emptiness. It often deepened it. Still, Post didn't let that sadness define him. Instead, he poured it into his music. Songs like Go Flex, Deja Vu, and I Fall Apart carried a soul that people could feel. They weren't just hits, they were heartbreaks set to melody. By the time his debut album Stony dropped in 2016, the world had fallen under his spell. Critics were confused, fans were obsessed, and Post Malone was no longer just an artist. He was a voice of a generation that felt lost, tired, but still hopeful. He was living the rockstar dream, but he was starting to realize that dreams can burn as bright as they destroy. Beerbongs and Bentleys, the sound of success and scars. By 2018, Post Malone had transformed from a viral newcomer into one of the biggest names in music. The release of his second album, Beerbongs and Bentleys, marked a turning point, not just in his career, but in how the world saw him. The album wasn't just a collection of songs. It was an experience, a journey through fame, heartbreak, and the price of success. When Rockstar featuring 21 Savage dropped, it hit like a thunderclap. The song topped charts across the globe and painted Post as a wild, untouchable figure, living fast, breaking rules, and embracing chaos. But if you listened closely, there was something deeper in his voice, a quiet exhaustion, a sense that the rockstar life wasn't all glitter and glory. Beerbongs and Bentleys broke records instantly. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, streamed millions of times within hours. Songs like Psycho, Better Now, and Candy Paint became anthems for an entire generation, navigating success and sadness at the same time. Every track carried that signature Post Malone mix, a little rap, a little rock, a lot of heart. But fame had its shadows. Behind the gold grills, tattoos, and sold-out arenas, Post was fighting anxiety, loneliness, and the pressure to stay on top. He spent long nights drinking, writing, trying to quiet the noise in his head. He wasn't chasing money or fame anymore. He was chasing peace. Interviews during that time showed a softer side of him. "I just want to make people happy," he'd say with a tired smile. Fans loved him because he wasn't trying to be perfect. He was open about his flaws, his insecurities, his struggles. He was human, and that made him real. Still, the whirlwind of success never stopped. From performing on late-night shows to selling out stadiums, Post Malone had become the voice of modern emotion. Someone who could turn pain into poetry and heartbreak into hooks. But deep inside, a quiet question haunted him. Was all this worth it? The world saw the rock star, but the man behind the smile was starting to crumble under the weight of his own legend. Behind the tattoos, the man beneath the fame, underneath the bright lights and platinum records, there was a side of Post Malone the world didn't always see. The tattoos on his face, "Stay away," "Always tired," the barbed wire across his forehead, weren't just random ink. They were messages, silent cries, and reminders of battles fought in private. Each mark told a story of pain, protection, and identity. Post never tried to hide his vulnerability. He often said he got tattoos on his face because he felt ugly without them. A shocking confession from someone adored by millions. But that's who Post was, brutally honest, even when it hurt. Fame had given him everything, yet it had also taken pieces of him he could never get back. Behind the curtain, he was a simple soul, the kind of guy who loved playing video games with friends, drinking beer on the porch, and jamming to old country songs. The glitz of Hollywood never really fit him. He preferred worn-out sneakers over designer shoes, laughter over luxury. But fame doesn't let you stay simple for long. Paparazzi followed him everywhere. Rumors spread faster than his songs. People criticized his looks, his lifestyle, even his mental health. Yet, he never fought back with anger. Instead, he smiled, shrugged, and said, "I just want to make music that people feel." When Circles came out in 2019, it revealed the truest version of Post Malone. Soft, emotional, haunting. It wasn't a song about money or fame. It was about love, loss, and the cycle of breaking down and rebuilding yourself. That song wasn't just a hit. It was therapy. Fans connected to it deeply because they saw their own pain reflected in his. In a world obsessed with perfection, Post stood out by being imperfect. He wasn't a polished celebrity. He was human, flawed, and full of heart. The tattoos, the beer cans, the messy hair, they weren't his image. They were his armor. But even armor can crack, and as his fame grew, so did the cracks in his peace. The boy who once dreamed in a Texas bedroom was now living every dream imaginable, but searching desperately for something money couldn't buy: himself. Circles, when success feels like losing yourself. By the time Circles took over the world, Post Malone had already achieved everything most artists only dream of: platinum records, stadium tours, endless awards, and a fan base that adored him. Yet, behind the smiles and flashing lights, something inside him was quietly falling apart. Circles wasn't just a song. It was a reflection of his soul. The lyrics spoke of love fading, of cycles that never seem to end, and of the exhaustion that comes when you keep trying to fix something that's already broken. It was soft, melancholic, and painfully honest. The kind of song that makes you stare out a window and rethink your entire life. When Post performed it live, you could see it in his eyes. The weight of everything he'd been carrying. He'd smile on stage, raise his drink, shout, "I love you guys." But behind that charm was a man trying to hold himself together. Success had given him the world, but it had also stripped away his sense of normalcy. Tour life became a blur. Hotel rooms all looked the same. The roar of the crowd faded the second he stepped off stage. He'd sit alone, guitar in hand, wondering if the boy who once sang White Iverson for fun would even recognize the man he'd become. Interviews during that time painted a picture of someone deeply self-aware. He talked openly about anxiety, about drinking too much, about missing home. "It's hard sometimes," he admitted softly. "You wake up and you don't know where you are, but you've got to keep smiling." Despite it all, his love for music never dimmed. It became his escape, his medicine. Songs like Goodbyes, Wow, and Sunflower with Sway Lee proved he could blend pain with joy in a way few artists could. He wasn't just a hitmaker. He was a storyteller who turned heartbreak into harmony. Yet deep down, Post knew he needed more than applause. He needed peace, balance, and connection, something real beyond fame's illusion. He had built a world full of sound, but sometimes silence was what his heart longed for. The circles kept spinning, and Post Malone was still trying to find the way out. The lonely superstar, fame, fear, and finding peace. Success had made Post Malone a global icon, but fame, as he learned, is a double-edged sword. Behind the roaring crowds and glittering trophies, he was fighting invisible battles, sleepless nights, anxiety attacks, and a quiet fear that he might lose himself completely in the noise. People saw the tattoos, the beer cans, the laughter, but few saw the moments when he'd sit in silence, staring at his reflection, wondering if the price of fame was too high. The world loved Post Malone, but Austin, the kid from Texas, often felt forgotten. The road was endless, city after city, concert after concert. He'd step on stage to tens of thousands of fans chanting his name. But the moment he stepped off, the loneliness crept back in. It wasn't about money or success anymore. It was about meaning. You can have everything, he once said, and still feel like nothing. He began opening up about his mental health, admitting his struggles with alcohol and anxiety. Fans were moved by his honesty. They didn't just see a superstar. They saw a human being, broken but brave enough to speak his truth. That vulnerability only deepened the bond between Post and his fans. Still, he longed for something pure, something real beyond the flashing lights. He found comfort in small things, writing alone at night, playing guitar for no one, calling his parents just to hear their voices. Those moments grounded him, reminded him of who he really was before the world took over. During this period, he also started focusing on growth, physically, mentally, and spiritually. He cut down on drinking, began working out, and surrounded himself with people who truly cared about him. Slowly, the fog began to lift. Post realized that peace didn't come from applause. It came from acceptance. Accepting that he wasn't perfect, that he didn't need to be, and that the love of his fans wasn't for the image, but for the soul behind it. The lonely superstar was learning how to be whole again, not through fame, but through finding himself in the silence. Softer soul, love, healing, and new beginnings. After years of chaos, fame, and restless nights, Post Malone began to find something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The tattoos, the parties, the endless touring, all of it had defined him once, but now he was searching for something quieter, something purer. And slowly, he started to find it in love, healing, and the simple things that truly mattered. In 2022, everything changed. Post became a father. When he announced the birth of his baby girl, the world saw a new side of him, softer, calmer, and more grounded. "It's the best thing that's ever happened to me," he said, smiling in interviews with genuine warmth. That single moment shifted everything. The wild rock star had turned into a gentle dad who just wanted to protect his little world. He started talking less about fame and more about gratitude. He spoke of wanting to live longer, to be healthy, to be there for his daughter. The endless drinking and self-destructive habits slowly faded, replaced by a new rhythm, one built on purpose and peace. Fans noticed the glow. He looked happier, healthier, more at ease. Musically, too, something beautiful happened. His album 12 Carat to Fake reflected a more mature Post, emotional, introspective, and deeply human. Tracks like Cooped Up and Love, Hate, Letter to Alcohol revealed a man still wrestling with his demons but finally learning to face them with honesty and grace. It wasn't about chasing hits anymore. It was about expressing truth. In his downtime, Post retreated to Utah, far from the chaos of Hollywood. There, surrounded by mountains and silence, he rediscovered himself. He spent days writing, playing guitar, and enjoying the peace that fame could never give. The man who once lived on adrenaline now found joy in stillness. Fatherhood had turned him into something new, not less of a rock star, but more of a man. He laughed more, smiled softer, and spoke about love like it was the greatest gift of all. For the first time in years, Post Malone wasn't running from his pain. He was learning to live with it and to love through it. The evolution from rockstar to real human being. As Post Malone entered a new era of his life, something incredible happened. He evolved, not just as an artist, but as a man. The transformation was quiet yet powerful. The world that once saw him as a wild rock star now began to see him as something deeper, a reflection of growth, healing, and authenticity. Gone were the chaotic nights and empty bottles. In their place came mornings filled with purpose, coffee with his fiancée, laughter with his daughter, and long hours spent in his Utah studio crafting songs that spoke from the heart. For Post, music had always been his therapy, but now it became his way of documenting peace. His new sound wasn't about breaking records. It was about breaking patterns. He began blending soul, folk, pop, and hip-hop in a way that felt effortless and true. Tracks from his later projects, including Austin, carried a warmth that fans hadn't heard before. Stripped-down guitars, raw vocals, and lyrics that felt like handwritten letters to himself. The man who once sang about excess was now singing about balance. The artist who once drowned his pain was now embracing his emotions fully. Every note, every line, carried the wisdom of someone who had fallen, risen, and learned to live gently. Publicly, Post seemed lighter. His smile was no longer a mask. It was real. He laughed about the past, called himself just a guy who loves making tunes, and reminded everyone that success isn't measured by awards, but by peace of mind. He no longer chased validation. He simply created because it made him happy, and the world responded with love. Fans admired his evolution, not the flash, not the fame, but the honesty. They had watched him grow from a kid with a dream into a man who understood that true power lies in vulnerability. Post Malone had become more than a musician. He was a mirror for millions, proof that even when life breaks you, you can rebuild yourself into something softer, stronger, and more real. The rock star had evolved into a human being who finally understood what truly matters. Legacy of light, the heart that never stopped singing. In the end, Post Malone's story wasn't just about fame, fortune, or records. It was about transformation. From a shy Texas kid with big dreams to one of the most influential artists of his generation. His journey became proof that real success isn't measured in charts or trophies, but in the courage to stay true to your soul. Post's legacy shines not because he was perfect, but because he was real. Through every heartbreak, every sleepless night, and every tear behind a tattooed smile, he never stopped creating. His music carried emotions that millions couldn't put into words. Pain, love, loss, hope, all wrapped in melodies that touched hearts across the world. He showed the world that you don't need to fit into one box. You can be messy, emotional, gentle, loud, all at once, and still be enough. His blend of genres, from hip-hop to pop to country and rock, wasn't rebellion. It was freedom. The sound of a man refusing to be defined by anything other than truth. As the years passed, Post found what he'd been searching for all along: peace, away from Hollywood, surrounded by mountains. His daughter's laughter became his favorite song. He didn't need the spotlight anymore. He had found light within himself. When fans look back at Post Malone, they won't just remember the hits: Circles, Rockstar, Sunflower, Congratulations. They'll remember the heart behind them. The man who taught them it's okay to feel broken, to fall apart, to start over. The man who showed that even the loneliest souls can find love and purpose if they just keep believing. Post once said, "We're all just trying to figure it out." And that's beautiful. And maybe that's his true legacy, reminding the world that imperfection is not weakness, it's humanity. The tattoos will fade someday, the lights will dim, but the feeling his songs gave people, that quiet comfort of knowing someone out there understands, will last forever. Because Post Malone didn't just make music, he made millions of people feel less alone, and that will always be his greatest hit.